Now let's move on to the second half. And notice we have a first half and a second half, and they're delineated not just by cadences harmonically, but they're delineated by these repeat signs. It's a very common way to see a form created in classical, in the classical era, and in the Baroque era as well. You'll find these kinds of dance forms that have a first half and a second half. It's foundational to the rounded binary. And by the way, it also is the sort of kernel of design for the sonata form, which became extremely elaborated in the 19th century. So in the second half, what a composer usually does, so this is usually considered the A section, the first half, and this is considered the B section. So as a B section, you need contrast. And so the composer is going to introduce some contrast here. If we listen to this, let's do that now. And I'll just preface that by saying, when we listen to this, we'll notice that we have new material, but also old material. So we're going to get one phrase that's new, and then we're going to return back to what we found in the first half. Let's listen for that. Okay, so let's do some analysis. Look at it harmonically. What do we get? Actually, we get something we haven't seen before, but we've talked about. It's very nice to have this. We get a 1 chord, and then we get this 4 chord, but our bass note is the same as the bass note of the 1 chord. This is a pedal 6/4. So here's our pedal 6/4 being used. That continues, and then back to 1. And then again, simply keep it at 1. I'm not going to write down 1 again because we already have it. 5 in first inversion, definitely. And what's this guy here as a non-chord tone? No, I'd probably say that's a chord tone, so it's a 5-6-5. Back to 1. And for some reason, this is going to, I'm going to put this in real quick. For some reason, Sibelius isn't letting me analyze this right now. It's just skipping all the way over here for some reason. That's okay, I'll analyze this, and then we'll come back to this one, because this is something we learned just this week. And then 5, so 1-6-4, cadential 6/4 going to 5. Going to 5, but we'll put that in later. Okay, let me put those things in here. Okay, and this guy, let's look at him. Well, if we make this look like a triad, we would have this as the root, this is the third, and this is the fifth. So what is that? D sharp, F sharp, and A natural, so minor third and minor third. That's a diminished chord. Diminished triad is a leading tone triad. So what is it the leading tone of? Well, this is a D sharp, so this is now functioning as the leading tone. And it's a leading tone to what? It's a leading tone to the E, and in the key of A, the E is the 5 chord. I see. So now I've got a lot of information about this, and I can describe its relationship to what's happening harmonically. So we've got a 7 diminished of sorts. Whoops. Also 7 diminished, hold on a second. 7 diminished 6, it's in first inversion, of Well, we're going to E, which is the dominant 5 chord, so it's a 5. Good. 7 diminished in first inversion of the 5 chord. That's how we'd analyze this chord. And now we can complete the harmonic analysis here, because this is essentially just a repetition of what happened before. So let's be efficient about things and more or less just copy what we had before. We're really, when we're doing it when we're being efficient, so to speak, we're really just looking for changes from earlier. We don't really see many. We've got 1, we've got 5, 6, 5. At least here we don't. We get 6, we get 6, 7, 5 in first inversion. This is more or less like here, like the second phrase. 1 and then 2, 6. What just happened? Whoops. It's not going to let me do that. Let me do this. Just give me a second. 2, 6. 1, 6, 4. Again, this is pretty much what just happened. Oh, and it's not going to let me do that. And this is 1. Some of you may say, whoa, what are you talking about? That's not 1, that's 5. Look at that. But that's not the case. We'll talk about it in a second. Let me go back and analyze this. 1, 6, 4, of course, this is a cadential 6, 4 resolving to 5. And for some weird reason, it has something to do with the voice numbers. But it's not letting me always do harmonic analysis. Okay, good. We get 5, and I say this is 1. So why am I saying that? Well, if we look at these 2 upper notes, we see that they're carried over from before, and they resolve upwards. And you may recall I said something about that. That's the opposite of a suspension. We call it a retardation. I'll just put it up here. And so these are actually non-chord tones, resolving upward. So this is 1. And this is a cadence. Well, sort of. It's sort of a cadence. But I would definitely analyze it as a cadence. It's an internal cadence. This itself, what happens here, is not a phrase in and of itself. This is an extension of this whole phrase. But we hear a cadence here, we might as well analyze it as such, but recognize that it's an internal cadence. Let's do some analysis here because we have some new stuff happening. Well, old stuff, but redone in a new way. We get 1. What's this? Well, that's looking like 5, 7 with the 5th in the bass. It's 5, 4, 3. Ah, this is a passing 5 chord, yeah? Good, so this is a passing chord, so that means it's probably going to a 1 in first inversion, and indeed it is. 1 in first inversion. Now it's going to a 4 chord, looks like it. I think you could analyze this as 4. We've got root, 3rd, and 5th with a passing tone here. Root, 3rd, 5th, so 4, 1, 6, 4, whoops, 1, 6, 4, 5, 7, 1. And here we end on the root. These are root position chords. Sorry, we end on the tonic. These are root position chords. This looks like perfect authentic cadence. We'll put this in here maybe. Arpeggiatori, we leap into the non-chord tone, step out of it. Well, that gives us a look at the harmony, and by looking at the harmony, we also got a chance to look at where the cadences are. We saw up here we have a parallel period, so what do we want to call this bit? We've got 2 phrases as well. This one is different than the second one. This one, oops, I didn't put in the cadence here. We get a half cadence there, a weak and inconclusive cadence, finishing off with a perfect authentic cadence. This is an internal cadence. Again, so we really analyze this cadence as the end of the phrase. So weak and strong, or that is inconclusive and conclusive, we put them together. There's some kind of period form. This one we called parallel, and I haven't introduced this yet, but I'm going to introduce it now. This where we get a kind of, I'm going to put these in parentheses because this isn't actually really the case, but we have an A, and we get a B. So, and they form a period. When that happens, we call it a contrasting period. So this term, if they're the same, if the two phrases are the same or very similar, we use the word parallel. If they're different, we use the word contrasting. But what's really going on here in terms of, if I called this A an A prime, so I can't call this thing, which is totally different, A, because it's different. So we got to call it something else, and we're going to call it B. And if we look at the total structure, the whole structure, I want to go down here maybe. Maybe I'll just put it up here. If we look at the structure of the whole thing, we've got an A, then we've got A prime. Then we got this B, and we get the A prime again. And this is the form of the piece. We get this A part and this B part, but in this B part, we get the A again. And a form with this structure is what we call a rounded binary. Now, so let's look at the name. Binary because it's two parts, an A part and a B part. Rounded because in the B part, you get a return of the A part. Again, like I said in the preview to this set of videos on analyzing this work, this rounded binary form you find all over the place. It's the form used for minuets, as well as the trios that you find as the second part of a minuet. It's the form you'll see in a lot of these short, any of these short dance forms. They're very often rounded binary. They're not always rounded binary, and particularly in the Baroque era, you'll find that they're not rounded binaries. They're just binary forms. The A and the B are different from each other, and you have an A part and a B part. But in this era, what you find more commonly is a rounded binary form.